So Lance Hurd, sounds like he goes by Lance Hurd, 4-star offensive tackle, 6'5", 300 from Louisiana. Seems like he's an LSU favorite. Nebraska's in there, but Auburn offered him earlier this week. And when Auburn folks see offensive tackles being offered, we get excited, John. We get excited and we get filled with hope every single time. What do we know about this kid?
Yeah, he's an emerger this spring, really this year. We're starting to hear more about Zalance. As you said, Louisiana guy, 6'5", 300 pounds, one that when coaches went by to see him this spring, a lot of them left with more answers than questions, which is a good thing for that recruit. So he started to pick up a ton of scholarship offers, really dating all the way back to January as his 2021 tape got out. He's now at a bigger program as well in Neville, Louisiana. So I do think that will help to further increase his profile like we saw in the spring months. So yeah, LSU's in there. You just mentioned Auburn just offered. So the next step, of course, is getting him to the Plains to have him check out the program. And a lot of other schools are kind of in that same group because for a kid who is emerging kind of before our eyes, he hasn't taken a whole lot of visits. You know, I think Nebraska, like you said, is in the mix and got him on campus. And that's really it as far as we can tell at this point. So most of these kids that we talk about are always, you know, long-term recruits, guys who have had offers for a while and they're starting to wind down. I think Hurd is on the opposite end of the spectrum. He's just now, you know, in takeoff relative to his recruitment. So I do think there could be some time between now and maybe a final decision. So there's an opportunity for Auburn to get him on campus and kind of see where he stacks up relative to some of the other top tackles on the board, Wilkin Formby, Stanton Ramil, the two in-state guys, as well as Clay Wedden from down in Tampa and some of these others that have the Tigers in the mix. So they're right in the thick of it for a handful of guys that all have tackle potential. And I know, as you mentioned, that's a big deal up there.
It is, yeah. And Ramil, you mentioned him, the talented tackle from Thompson, put out his top 8. Auburn made the cut there. So some good news on the Plains. But it's interesting. You talk about Zalance Hurd ascending. Auburn's usually, there's been a trend since Brian Harson's taken over that Auburn's been in earlier on some of these guys that are ascending. Did he just slip through the cracks, you think? Why did the offer come so late? I mean, obviously at a huge position of need for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think the board is expanding, you know, and I think it could potentially tell us maybe where Auburn stands with some of these other guys on the board, right? Maybe they feel,
I hope not, John. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
Maybe it could just be one guy, right? It could just be one offensive tackle that maybe you just don't feel as good about. But also, I think to Hurd's credit, you know, he made the transfer. He's got more eyeballs on him at that school, and other programs are jumping in. So I do think that, you know, it's still early enough to where it's not something that Hurd is going to, you know, poach against the Tigers for, like, hey, you offered me so late, now I'm not going to consider you. I don't think it's anywhere close to that. But usually it means that either the board is expanding and you just want to target more guys, or potentially one of the guys that was relatively high on the board maybe doesn't feel like Auburn is still in the mix for him. But I can't name them, right? I mean, I think they're still high up. For Ramil, we just mentioned. Formby's, you know, got this whole kind of hyper local group that he's looking at: Bama, Auburn, Ole Miss, the main competitors there. Clay Wedden certainly still very high on Auburn. I touched base with his camp earlier this week. He's set to check out Auburn as well. So I think the main guys are still the main guys, but maybe secondary targets are starting to make moves, and there's another spot potentially on the table. So let's stay on the optimistic front today.